Hello, I'm Chuck Phillip. Welcome to another edition of Southern Home Talk. And so I'm standing outside of a mansion, an old Victorian mansion. And it's a great cutaway view of what your typical highfalutin Victorian home looked like in the late 1800s or turn of the century. And this was made by Jackie Vogler, and it was built for her granddaughter. It says, "To Kristen with love, September '86, Grandma Vogler." And so let's just go ahead and we'll start off on the first level, particularly at the kitchen. I was raised by my grandparents, and they both came from different lifestyles. My grandmother was born in Pineapple, Alabama, to sharecroppers, and so they didn't have running water, no electricity. They had to go out to the outhouse for their bathroom and had to draw water from the creek to cook with. And my granddad, he was born in Pritchard, Alabama. His dad owned Pritchard Coal and Ice. And so my granddad delivered coal and ice to the residents in Pritchard. Like I say, he was born in 1910, so I guess probably in the late teens or early 20s he was doing that. And so you can see this cast iron stove right there. That's pretty typical. And a coal bucket sitting there beside it. And this would be the ice box with a big old block of ice in there. And some of these old timers still call it the ice box, the refrigerator. That's what my granddaddy called it. He said, you need to keep the door of the ice box shut. And of course, this right here is a cast iron stove. And these were pretty much used in big rooms, like living rooms. It could be in the bedroom too, to heat the house. And usually you see a kettle on top of that with water in it, so the house wouldn't dry out from all the dry heat going through the home. And so let's stay on the first level. This would be the living room. It's got a Victrola, a chandelier, and my parents even had furniture like this with a marble table. They had all that stuff even through the 60s and 70s. They had it. And you can see in the far back, that's a grandfather clock. And kind of a cool thing about that is Emperor Clocks was in Fairhope. In fact, that was my very first job, I guess you could say, because after school, when I went to organic school, we would go over to Emperor Clock Company and stuff envelopes where they could mail them out, the advertising for these clocks, and they were doing really good business in the 70s. And in fact, some of these clocks you could see on some of the game shows where they gave them away, like The Price is Right and that sort of thing. And so this would be the formal dining room, and my parents had one of those as well. I mean, they were still doing these formal dining room concepts all the way into the 80s and maybe even some of the 90s. And we'll move on up to the second level, and that'll be this little girl's bedroom. Maybe that's Kristen's bedroom, complete with wallpaper. In fact, I bet you that photograph right there is probably Kristen. That's probably who that is. So we'll move to the bathroom, and it's amazing how accurate this is because it's got the clawfoot tub. That toilet that you see with a pull chain is called a water closet. Those were developed in England in the 1880s, and you'd pull that chain and it would flush the toilet. And those are starting to make a little bit of a comeback as a decorative functional piece. And you notice that the faucets are separated. It's hot, cold. You didn't have a single lever faucet back then. And also too, the pipe in a lot of these older Victorian homes was lead pipe. The whole pipe was lead. And then they eventually went to steel pipe or galvanized pipe, which would clog up because it'd get rusted up. In fact, it's still in some homes to this day. I inspected a house not too long ago that had that galvanized pipe in it. You had hardly any water flow at all because of it. But also know too about plumbing that when they did finally go to copper, well, the solder was lead. So you could still have some lead in your plumbing system even if your house was built in the 80s. So this is going to be the master bedroom, and it's big enough, it looks like. It's got makeup desk right there. And it's got a kerosene lantern back there in the back. And my granddad also sold kerosene as well for people who had kerosene lamps. And I guess if you didn't have them, you'd burn candles. But they had electricity back then, but not every home had it. But some of these houses I inspected in Mobile that are of this time frame still had knob and tube wiring in the home. That's just bare wire where it goes around a ceramic insulator. I mean, I put in my report they should change that stuff out because it's just dangerous. Now, you can see it's got a fireplace here on this top second floor. And it's not unusual, you can see here as well, where it's got one on the first floor. So it wouldn't be uncommon to have a fireplace on every level. And if you notice, this is a 3-story home. A lot of these houses in Mobile are kind of identical to this, where they're usually just 2-story and it's just an attic above. But a lot of these attics in these older houses are big enough to make a 3rd story out of them. And I think if I had one of these, I would do the same thing. And so that way this could be a conditioned space versus a ventilated space. But know that these older houses, especially of this time frame, there was no insulation in the walls unless it was added later. And the windows, a lot of them are original, and they're not efficient at all. So you would have to have one hell of an HVAC system to keep this thing climate controlled because of the thermal load being put on this from both summer and winter. But you can see that there was a lot of work that went in this. All this furniture, not all of it, but I think a good bit of it's handmade as well. And so you can see this telephone on the wall. I guess if you were highfalutin, you had one of them as well. But I remember back in the 60s where there were some people in the neighborhood had a party line. And I mean, they would share a phone with someone else down the street. And so sometimes I'd pick up the phone to call home and it'd be someone on the other line. So who's on the phone? Oh, that's my neighbor down at the end of the road. We got a party line. But also when I worked for the railroad, the telegraph wires were still up. And they were using them with the railroad too. So, back before they had a fully radio system, the way it worked is you went into the siding and got off the locomotive, and there was a phone almost similar to this that you'd crank up and call the dispatcher and let them know where you were. And so those lines may still be up there. Those had those real colorful glass insulators. But one thing I've found that's kind of amazing, I've got a thing on this channel called Abandoned Homes of Alabama, and it's been real educational to me to go out and look at these abandoned homes. And I'm really surprised at how well they fared with no maintenance whatsoever, being abandoned 50 years or more in some cases. And some of these houses I've inspected in Mobile, like these Victorian homes like we're looking at here, most of, if not all of them, are on crawl spaces. And usually I find a lot of problems in crawl spaces, but I'm always quite pleasantly surprised when I inspect these Victorian homes. And the reason why they have fared better in the ones I've seen is the wood. It's old growth lumber, and a lot of it's heart pine, so it's resilient to both moisture and pest. But, it's now 100-year-old lumber, so that lumber may be reaching its breaking point, at some point from just being old. But I am surprised of how well that lumber has held up over the years. So let's just go ahead and keep turning the outside of this. I'm going to go ahead and try to wrap this up. But you can see, the amount of detail that went into this. Got a wraparound porch. Out there on the swing with the dog, baby. Entry doors. Wraps all the way around. They got the curtains pulled back on this one, the cat looking out, and wallpaper. Oh, I'll never put that crap up again. That is hell getting that stuff off. So yeah, you think about that. I mean, they even put wallpaper in this as well. So, a lot of love and time went into building this house. So I hope this has been informative. Hope you can add to this as well. So if you have anything you'd like to put put in the comments. I'd like to see it. And not only me, there'd probably be some other people that'd like to hear it as well. Thanks for taking the time to watch this, guys, and take care.